find out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on with this work study. The agenda includes discussion of codifying committees. I'm going to say something and then we can go from there. What you did as far as explaining your cover letter and everything, I like. And that gives you time to study it and to go a little bit. But the committees we have right now can be changed with full council. Okay. And what I'd like to see is when you have something you'd like to change on a committee. Committees we voted on the first week, which we were required by ordinance, passed 6-2. So them are your committees for this year. But you can change them during the year with full council approval.
Yeah.
Council approval. That's a majority. And anybody that wants something to change or they'd like to see it change should write the cover sheet like you have and present it to the full council for study.
And that's exactly what we've done, right? I mean, that was what was in the PDF that should have been distributed to everyone through Sharon. And this isn't to adopt those. This is, I think, generally to consider this topic of what we do with our standing committees, how they should function, what would be the most useful thing for this body. So there's been some question. It's certainly, I've learned a lot looking into what these committees are. And my understanding, and
what
please...
I'd like to ask the council to do now is serve on the committee you was assigned to at the first meeting.
Well, we are.
Yeah, I understand. And then you got changes you want to make, bring them before the full council, and then let's start working them.
I believe, Tom, I've brought changes to the full council. We decided to have a work study, and that's what we're here to discuss.
You just give us a lot of these tonight, 2 of them that I have. This here...
I've given this a month ago. The questions that broke it down, and I suggested some committees, and I solicited some other input on what committees maybe would be appropriate. So I believe I've done exactly what you've asked.
Okay, and what I want, and I'm not saying you have. What I'm saying is the committees have been formed, and we're serving on them. The only way you can change them now is with the majority.
Certainly. Absolutely. The full council has to vote to create or get rid of a committee without any doubt, and that's as it should be, right? In fact, that's exactly the main point, which is standing committees, correct me if I'm wrong, but according to MML, standing committees, we don't even have to have them. They are completely a structure by this body, the 8 of us, not the administration, by the 8 of us, to help us do our business. They could be created to facilitate some communication with the administration or to help in the general running of government, but our standing committees are not, they're not, I mean, the administration can go make its committees. These committees are ours, right? The reason that the mayor, for instance, appoints is not by any state statute. That's there because when we built our ability to make committees, we said the mayor will appoint. So that's an ordinance. That's something that belongs to us, right? Everything about these committees belongs to us, this city council. And the reason to form a committee is to produce some tool, a useful tool to help us govern. And there's pieces of what we have now that work really, really well, right? And there's pieces that I think maybe are outdated or could be updated or we could do better. Or maybe there's things that are more important for us to be addressing. For instance, instead of just talking about what bills we have to pay this month, maybe we need to be looking at policies that we need to be considering that will promote economic development, right? And there's no place that is naturally happening. So I was hoping that this would be a good forum for us to find ways to make our committees the way we see them in our own minds, the way we've organized them on paper, and the tasks that we're giving them more useful to our city government so we can do a better job for Louisiana. One of those things is this notion that, I mean, it's interesting. I find it very interesting, all the administrative stuff that I find sitting here and listening to committee reports. But, and I'm just grabbing a number here, but I'd say 85% of what I hear talked about in committee meetings in the last 2 years that I've been sitting in the audience and, listening, is administrative. It's not policy. And I think that we need to focus on policy because those policies are the framework that empower the administration. And that doesn't mean exclude the administration from policy in any way. We need to know what you need, right? What does Bob need from a policy standpoint to go fix that tank that's up there? But it's, that's where that conversation ends, is policy. The legislative branch makes policy. The administrative branch enacts that policy. Policy, according to MML, it can be, I said, where's the threshold? Where is the threshold for, and I have some notes I can pull out exact quotes if you'd like, but my question was, where does the power of the city council end in terms of making policy? And the example I gave was totally a ridiculous thing, just to push the idea. I said, could we enact a policy, could a city council enact a policy that required the city clerk to only use purple pens? Yes, we can. The exact quote was right down to the second. The policy is established by city council. In the absence of that policy by the city council, the administration can make their own policies, right? Which is great, because that means there's a continuum. You get to figure out if there's something we haven't thought about, you get to invent what's going to work, right? Thank goodness. So I want our conversations, I think, need to be refocused on policy, not on administration.
I haven't studied yet, but I have skimmed through it, but it looks like to me, and I may be wrong, but it looks like to me you would be taking me away from the citizens.
In what way?
Come to their council board and through my committee present a problem, just like that fellow did a while ago.
Let me share something with you. Let me find it. A question I asked directly to MML. How should a city council person deal with a citizen's concern, which are really administrative issues? There's a pothole in front of my house. I don't like my water bill, right? Such as street repair request or dangerous animal report. How about larger concerns such as flooding caused by poor, etc.? And so two separate conversations, but he says, really a single council person has no power to address a citizen's request. In fact, he said, when that citizen comes to me and says, hey, Bart, there's a pothole, I need to stress, all I am is a citizen that he's talking to. He's not talking to the full council. Our role is to forward those to the appropriate city channels. That's why we have that form that you gave me, right? We need a form. Now, what that form looks like, or whether it's available online, or how we track it, or the rules that we might want for feedback to that citizen so they know that their pothole was addressed or can't be addressed or is on a schedule to be addressed, that's policy. We can make policy about how we're going to make that process work. But in terms of fixing that pothole, all we can do is hook them up with Bob.
That's not my point, Lord.
I'm sorry.
My point is a citizen has come to me about that pothole.
Mm-hmm.
He's sitting right out there, and he's wanting to hear me say that you guys, there's a pothole in front of that man's house, what are we going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important that he hears me say that. And what you're saying, I have said that to the mayor or Bob in private, and that fellow don't know that has been discussed.
I do believe, and MML did say, that we have every right to be an advocate for our constituency.
Here, at this table.
Even here at this table, if necessary. But I mean, if he brings it up, if he brings it up at a full council, okay, you bring it up at a full council meeting, then yeah, we can bring that up. But in the end, all you can do, or all I can do about the pothole claim, all we can do is say,
Yeah, well, I
Bob, this
understand that.
is
And I
here.
understand I'm a legislator, and that's all I am. But I've got to connect with the people out there. We need to connect with the citizens. They're the ones that elected us to do that.
And you see something that I'm proposing, or the
Well,
discussion of policy?
Yeah. If we're just going to sit here and make policy, we're not going to discuss the citizens.
But that's the only power we have, is policy. We don't have the power to go.
Part of it is PR.
That's fantastic. And so one of the committees that I've thought we ought to have is to discuss how is it that we do communicate. Because like I said a minute ago, I find all this administrative information that I get very interesting. I'll bet a lot of people would find it interesting. It'd be nice if that was more readily available. Those little reports that we get, the Parks report, those. Why aren't those available to just everybody online on the website? Those are fantastic, right?
The other point I want to make is not all committees are council. My committee is in the ordinance book. Why?
Well, let me address that, because that's a fantastic one. The fact that we have a water committee is a complete happenstance. Most cities don't. It's a vestige of a board of public works, and I think the water committee functions. In fact, if you looked at my document, I suggest leaving it as is. So I think it's actually an example of one that is probably functioning pretty well for our city, even though it's abnormal to other cities. But the thing that's interesting there is exactly what you said. It's in ordinance. My committee's in ordinance. Mine isn't. It should be. If we're going to have, if this body forms a committee, we should describe its scope, what its purpose is, what it's supposed to do, why it's there. It shouldn't just be a committee named after a department in the administration. I mean, that makes no sense. If one of the roles is to give voice to the firemen or the policemen or human resources of any kind, then that's fantastic. But that should be codified, right? What those powers are should be as codified for every standing committee as they are for water or ordinance.
I'm not against changing anything, except for I will not be took away from, just like Reverend Cohn there, when Larry brought him up, we can't stop doing that. We can't stop letting the citizens have a say.
Absolutely. I don't think anything I'm proposing or thinking would do that.
I think they're one and the same. I mean, I don't see why you would want to stop doing that. That's why I got involved, was to get involved with the people. But on the other side, I also want to be a part of streamlining and addressing different issues that we haven't. It's not an offense saying we haven't, been able to tackle the economic development or different issues. But I think that's all part of New Vision. That's all part of bringing collective minds together, is to say, okay, this is one thing we've kind of been missing, let's attack this. I certainly don't want to be away from the people. That's who I am. I'm not a politician, I'm none of those things. I'm just a normal guy trying to help, and that's what I want to be. But I also agree with what you're saying as well. There's certain things that I think we can address, and really kind of key in on it and really broaden the scope of what we're trying to do here, instead of just attacking water ordinances and the same issues every week. So, I think I really do think it'll bring an excitement to everybody here to really start attacking different issues in town, because different people have different passions in this town.
I think if we do it well, Monroe, it will bring you closer to the people. It will allow you to address things. First off, it will allow a structure that they know where to go. What I heard Bob sit here and say is, why didn't you come talk to me, right? It's not clear that was the thing to do. So if that was the thing to do, the fact that we promote doing that here is kind of detrimental, right? I mean, what we really want is for Randall to wind up talking to Bob and get that resolution.
Instead of taking up our time.
Right.
And producing some sort of frustrating conversation.
Thinking, go to him.
No, I know, but you got to know that.
Yeah, you have to understand the individual.
I do.
And there should be room for that.
Absolutely.
Because you all know, there should be room for that.
It might be nice to put one more page on here that you could give to the person that contacted you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I keep one.
A feedback loop, right?
I keep one when I turn it in,
Mm-hmm.
and I look back at it. And was this done?
Yeah.
I had one up on Tennessee
It's
Street.
gravitating to where it's totally off the issue of standing committees.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, I think what the conversation is, the standing committees or the city council has a role.
And I have no problems with the proposals on that. That's something that can be ironed out. But
I don't see where it's diverging.
Is this the committees that you envision here?
I'm not saying that maybe we should not change a single thing. Okay? What I am saying is it occurs to me that there's some things that maybe could be changed that would be better. So if I just go, okay, I'm going to start from scratch, and from what I've seen in 2 years watching this body work, what committees would be useful to address policy, because that's our role, right? Then I've outlined some that I think are worth considering, right? To talk about. And maybe they're the right ones, maybe they're not the right ones.
Okay, then, I hate to, I keep talking to you guys. If you just interrupt me, take over. But this ordinance and compliance, why do we need this ordinance if we adopt this?
Why do we need what
The
ordinance?
ordinance you just gave us? Why would we need to pass an ordinance to say that when we could just adopt this?
We can't. What I've presented isn't an ordinance. I haven't gone through and stripped out all the mentions of ordinance committee. I presume that we will have an ordinance committee, right? And that may change in scope. Maybe it's ordinance and compliance.
That's what I'm reading here.
Right.
But if we adopt this, then we wouldn't need this.
No, I think we still would.
You think so?
Yes?
Could I ask a question here of the council?
Sure.
How many of the council, not excluding anybody that's just came aboard, wants to change the committees? I mean, I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a problem with combining like fire and police under public safety,
Well,
that sort of thing.
Kathy, public safety, and I'm going to say this, all of you all are involved in public
Right.
safety. If Rich drives down the street, or you do, and you see a tree that blocks that sidewalk, you call it in and we get the tree removed. Broken sidewalk. I mean, things like that, and you know, everybody is concerned about safety.
if I could make a suggestion, I think that this is probably a subject that's going to require a lengthy discussion, and now may not be the time to do it.
Well, we
To
already
address it.
postponed it once, so let's get a little further with it. I'm
I
sorry
don't
that
see
it's-
what you're going to accomplish tonight.
Well, golly, I hope we can accomplish quite a bit. I hope that we can talk and come up with some good ideas.
I think with what you put out tonight, these papers, I did like that concept
Of what?
of the way you came up with this proposed
Your proposal.
ordinance and stuff.
Oh, well, that's a completely separate issue than
I
the
understand
committees,
that.
which we're here to discuss.
I understand that, but my question was to the full council, and you, of course, you put your hand up. Who wants to change the committees per se, and it has to go through the full council and by majority.
To actually change them.
To
So,
change
so
them.
really the question isn't who wants to change them. Who believes that there may be some structures
That's
that we could
correct.
adjust?
That's correct.
Do you think
So-
we could do a better job with our committee structure?
I think we could do a few different things. And it's not to say a better job. I think we could.
Well, what I would ask you to do, and you can do what you like because you are the council. I would like for you to talk with the other councilmen, stay on the committees you're at, work the committees for a little bit, and sell the idea to the council that's not really 100% ready to change.
Let me what I get the sense is that there's this fear or perception that somehow suddenly the councils that you appointed and that you're used to are going to disappear or be different. If we put this off a year, that's fine. Okay, I want to have the conversation about what the appropriate committees are. I'm not talking about changing them tomorrow. I'm saying that I want to hear. I don't know why, for instance, I don't know why we ever look at a warrant that doesn't have a thing on it that's different than the budget we approved. We approved the budget. That warrant is already approved. We don't have to see that bill.
Well, except that a parliamentary body has to make all appropriations.
That's correct.
But isn't that done in the budget?
No, that's a
yeah.
forecast.
Okay,
The
okay.
specifics, you do have to make the appropriation, and I think
Okay.
that's the mechanism for doing it.
And both are valid points. And both valid points. What you're saying is to the point of that there's other things, because
Yes.
that's not going to take up much of my time, obviously. There's other things that we can.
I want to talk about what we're going to do about this building that we can't afford to put a roof on. That's what I think.
I would like to answer that the way I seen it. I came back in as mayor in 2010. The council accepted these 3 buildings from Lassiter because he paid the county taxes.
Mm-hmm.
All that did was give the city of Louisiana a burden of 3 buildings. The city's not in the real estate business. And when they accepted them, they penalized the citizens of Louisiana for 3 buildings.
Okay, maybe, and I can see it described other ways also, and I'm not disagreeing, but there are other ways to describe that. The point is, we have these buildings. What are we going to do with them? I think we need to address, and it's not just these specific buildings. What is our policy when we wind up with an important historic structure?
This is not the focus of the work study.
It is exactly the purpose of the work
Sal,
study.
we were lucky that we got Sal as a finance. We had a finance committee chairman, and that chairman gave me half of it.
Yeah.
Because the finance scares some people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that person asked me if I would take half of the finance committee, and I did. So Sal could handle it, and he could handle grants and I don't know what all of that, because that's what he does for a living.
This is an excellent point.
But the next finance chairman may not feel they can do all of that.
And the next committees might ought to be different because of it. In fact, let me give you an example. When I was chair at Rankin Technical College of an architecture department, what I wanted to teach was a particular new CAD application. I had no faculty that could do it. What I had was faculty that was really great at civil engineering. So I focused on civil engineering because that's what I had assets to do really well. I think the same is true of any body like this. If we have someone like Sal, then let's get committees structured that helps support that. If we don't, then let's get our standing committees structured so they support the bodies that are. These things can be changed. I mean, it's not like you want to change them every time you meet, but they do not have to be static for 20 years.
And again, I'm going to speak personally to everybody, for myself. And I have no problem serving on the committee that I'm on currently because I have a lot to learn. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But again, getting involved here, I want to add more things as we go forward. And I think that's what Bart is so passionate about. And I think we all are. I really do. I think we're going to end up doing some good. But I think what we need is something in place to say, because this is something I want to visit. When you have something in finance and economic development, a planning and vision, an ordinance and compliance, there are efficiencies there. There are efficiencies we can look at. So, and personally, on an economic development side of things, or even a finance side of things, I do need help, just like anybody else is going to need help on these committees.
I think these committees have been in existence for too long. We have these set 4 committees, or 8 committees rather, and they may be redundant now. The city is moving ahead, technology is moving ahead. We need to be keeping up with what we need to do for the city.
If you,
You know, I served on the fire committee. I never had anything. You know,
did you ever attend any of their meetings?
I was never invited to.
You don't have to.
Well, okay, I called and discussed with the fire chief what is here.
What you're supposed to
Nothing.
Okay. But
He told me to buy home.
but let me say this to you, before we had the committees, you didn't get out of these chambers until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, because it was a talkathon. And it's exactly what it was. And we're having a meeting right now, it's supposed to be work study. I liked your presentation of this. I'd like to I'm talking about the ordinance.
But this
I
isn't
read
even
your
about the
other
ordinance.
papers. I read your other paper. There's some points I agree with you on, some I don't. And consequently, I asked a couple of the councilmen. Sal don't come in. I don't see Sal. I don't see Kathy.
Feel free to email me anytime, Tom.
That's the only thing.
And I don't come in to see you, and
That's
it's no
correct.
different.
So there's not much of a communication there. Sonny comes in daily. Larry comes in daily. Monroe comes in daily.
I come in weekly.
Not daily, I'm sorry.
I come in a couple times a week. You just happen
you
not
come
to
in
be
more than I
here.
In my
Okay.
defense, eventually I will be.
Okay, Chuck comes in occasionally.
I keep
That's
I keep in touch
that's
with
our
Bob.
communication. I don't get on the computer. I don't.
I understand.
And I won't communicate on the computer.
I
I like
understand.
to talk to you face to face. And I don't think that you and I have ever had any problems talking face to face.
No, we've been pretty straight with each other.
That's correct. But what I want to know, we can sit here all night long and talk about these committees and how we feel they should function and the difference. I'm not opposed to good committees. Not at all. It makes my job and his job a lot easier. But right now, I could ask you two things. How's changing these committees going to improve?
Great. Can I answer that one?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just take one example. I would like to see us take the Finance Committee and expand its scope to also include economic development. I think grants should also fit in there. I think we have the expertise on this council to do that, and I think that would drive the conversation towards more relevant, more useful policies to move our city forward. I believe that if we do that, we need to describe that committee diligently in the code, the same way we have the water or any other committee should be described that way. So does that answer the question?
Well, just like I'm going to answer you the way you just told me. I've asked you for an economic development, a person. Okay, I've asked you to join PCDA.
And both of those, by the way, are I hope on the agenda next time.
They will be as old business. We have Mark Twain Regional Planning Commission. We have PCDA, which works with Robin, and we have an economic developer. He or she will work with them. Plus, we could assign an economic developer to the grant committee.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take, you're talking about all committees, I'm talking about...
You want to talk about one committee at a time?
Yes.
Okay. Before we can do that, we had to get a consensus about what the committees are, what their purposes are, right? And I think we've kind of done that. For instance, Tom, you've asked, the administration has asked this body to fund an economic developer, right? Somebody to help with that. But what the role of that economic developer is not necessarily up to the administration. In fact, it's our responsibility to establish so much policy as we see fit. Now, if that's none, then it becomes entirely up to the administration. But if what we want is an economic developer that's going to spend some amount of time working with a finance and economic development committee of the city council, then that should be a part of the code that we write creating this committee. Right now, Finance Committee doesn't have that kind of structure. And I'm suggesting that economic development's important, and this is a good place to put that in.
We do have a job description and requirements for it, economic development.
But we don't, Tom.
That's correct.
So I would hope that in your request at the next city council meeting that would have been made available to us well in advance. That this body would go, okay, I like this. This is fantastic. But I also would really like to see this person working with the city council directly, because we're the ones who establish policy, not the administration. And we want to establish policies that encourage economic development. If they don't come from us, that's what our job is, right? And its economic developer is a huge resource, and I completely support it. But that needs to be done with a policy that connects that economic developer to this body, right? So where does that happen? Right now, where does that happen? A name's just a name, and it alludes to what the thing is that it's supposed to do. But I think we need to look at, and if you want to do them one at a time, I'm all for that. Let's look at finance, because we already have a finance committee, and let's look at maybe expanding it so that it could include grants. We can revisit these other things at other times. And I'm all good with that. I want to carry the ball down the field. So does that one sound palatable to you guys, to look at that committee and say maybe it could be more?
Sure. And Tom, I like the idea of attacking one of those at a time. I think it gives us time to really work on it and figure it out, because we'll have too much on our plate. And I think that's what everybody's feeling. We're just overwhelmed with saying, hey, let's just restructure all the committees. That's a great idea.
Then before we conclude, let me ask you how we are going to handle this. There is no planning and vision committee, right? There is no special projects committee. When do we talk about that? How do we appropriate ourselves to it? Now, committees, we've described standing committees in our ordinance, highly structured in terms of one member from each of the wards, and it's just, nobody's overlapping and all of this. All of our committees are just the city council members, right?
We have an annex in zoning committee.
Now, zoning has some special rules. Planning and zoning and buildings, the planning and zoning and board of adjustments are actually, and I asked this, I could read you the quotes. I asked MML about these. These two committees are adopted by ordinance, but they are adopted so that we can be empowered with actions that are actually given to us through state statute. They do not belong to the administration, and they do not belong to the city council.
No.
They belong to us both. So they're not. We're not talking about those particular committees.
But you have an executive committee that right now has no function.
And that's a committee of the administrations?
And two at large, which can be two councilmen.
Mm-hmm. Or not, right?
Yes.
Our committees, our standing committees, our finance committee, and I'm not recommending this, but as an illustrative point, our finance committee could decide, you know what, I want a citizen at large from each ward, that would be helpful to have that kind of input on our finance committee. We can do that. It does not have to be limited to 4. It doesn't have to be limited to the city council. It might be appropriate that we ask the city administrator to be on a particular committee, or the mayor to be on a particular committee. So we can formulate these things outside of that structure, but we would have to change that ordinance about how we create our that we've put upon ourselves about how we create standing committees. So the question, to get back to it, I'm glad to tackle them one at a time, but then we already have a finance. That's an easy one, right? We already have ordinance. I can imagine us having the same conversation and agreeing that if there's issues that we're fighting about sunshine law compliance, that maybe the ordinance committee can go and look for policies and procedures that we can put into place that would help us do a better job, right? Or do this job more effectively. But we don't have a communications and public relations. You mentioned public relations early as a part of how we communicate, our role that's important for this body, not just the administration, but for the city council to be able to communicate with the public, right? We don't have any place that we're addressing that or doing the work right? So how do we bring new ones into being? Or how do we look at the fire committee and go, we don't really need this one? But what are we going to do with the little pieces of it that still are relevant? How do we get that combined with police? Is that relevant? Should we have somebody from the hospital be a part of that committee so that we can represent health services? So that's a question for you guys. How do you want to approach that? If we do it one at a time, how do we do that?
I'd say secure input from those that have a vested interest. And I will be happy to be part of that vested interest.
So what's our action item from here? What do we want to do?
I would say
It's going to have to be studied. And there's one thing I would say, the sunshine law is the sunshine law.
Mm-hmm.
But if I call you and I want you to explain that paragraph right there, and you say, okay, I'll meet you down Piker and we'll drink a cup of coffee, and we invite Russell, and even Kathy.
Yep, we can have 4 of us.
I don't want somebody screaming, you're violating the sunshine law, because we won't be, because we're not making a decision, we're just talking.
That's correct. I understand there's
But
a number of...
But anybody gonna see 4 councilmen sitting there at a table, they're gonna get letters.
Well, I'll tell you what I did when I found myself in a similar situation. I took detailed notes and I posted it on my website and made it available to everyone about what it was that this meeting was
Well,
about.
that'd be fine, but if
You'll have
if you're
to...
not there, Chuck's there, and we don't have.
You'll have to find your own equivalency, but I agree. There's a communication issue, particularly in our current climate about sunshine law. But the point is that if we wanted to be able to look at compliance for anything, not sunshine law, in anything, we just want an ordinance and compliance kind of go together. So I can imagine that we would talk about those together.
I have a suggestion for you. Let's pick special committee with council approval to work on this and come back with a recommendation to the full council. And the committee I'd like to put on it, Jenna, Sonny, Bart, Monroe, and Sal. If that's agreeable with the council.
What?
We can't agree on that.
Bob, you're not busy enough? Do you need some more work?
Bob, Sonny, who are they?
Sal.
Bob,
Bob, Sonny,
Because
Bart,
in the long
Sal,
run-
Sal.
and
In the long
Monroe.
run, it'll simplify my duties.
Okay?
That's what I
I think
want.
it's good.
I think it's good.
Okay, that's fantastic, and I
And you
think
can call for a
This has to
work
go
study
to-
after you come up with
Yes.
something and bring the full
Yeah.
council in and make your
So
recommendation.
we'll have to agree to that next week.
yes.
Yes, yes.
If you'll put it on the agenda, I'll make
Put it on the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
It's good.
Okay. And with that,
Could I just make
yeah,
2 real quick points? A parliamentary body makes its own operating rules. So you could do it by ordinance, but you could set up committee rules that are just operating rules. It doesn't have to necessarily be minutes. Second thing is, I kind of noticed that the gist of everything had to do with standing committees. You don't forget about a procedure then for ad hoc committees,
Yeah.
and temporary committees.
That's great.
Like to address emergencies and that will take.
Actually, that's a fantastic notion because my idea for special projects was to have a group of people standing there ready to do any of those things. So that kind of was how I was addressing ad hoc committees. But it may be better to just have a separate process for it.